The Seahawks officially have moved into the final phase of their offseason program with OTAs kicking off today. What went down to the VMAC? I'll be breaking it all down in a bonus Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening from New Jersey or in nearby Bellevue. We greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks took another step closer to the 2023 regular season, kicking off their third phase of the offseason program today at the VMAC, the first organized team activity, or also known in short as OTAs. I'm going to be diving into some impressions from that first day, even though I was not on the ground there, able to see a lot of clips from the practices with other reporters that I work alongside, and also was able to talk to some people, watch the press conferences. A lot of interesting stuff coming out of the VMAC today. So I'll be breaking that all down in this bonus episode that is brought your way by FanDuel. This NBA season, you can get ready for the postseason with FanDuel. Make a fast break and get over there to FanDuel's website because new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. They can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and three-pointers drained. I'm a huge fan of player prop parlays, and you can make bets such as Austin Reeves to score 20 points at plus 140. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Seahawks moving into OTAs today at the VMAC, and I said earlier, I was not on the ground today in Seattle. I will be in attendance for mandatory practices make it for today's event. That being said, there's plenty of video footage out there, and I can already tell you one of my big takeaways here from the first session today, even though Jaxon Smith-Njigba was not involved with team stuff very much, he did do more than what he did at rookie minicamp a couple weekends ago. And you could see that with just the clips being there in attendance at rookie minicamp. He might have ran maybe 3 or 4 routes with a helmet on during that rookie minicamp. He didn't do a lot aside from just warming up, maybe doing some of the cut drills with the receivers and individual drills. But you can already see today with some of the clips that are out there, the comments that Geno Smith made after practice as well, getting his first opportunity in the practice field to throw passes to Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And he looked quicker. He looked more explosive today than what I saw at the rookie minicamp. Just watching the footage, that's obviously what you want to see. This is a kid that's supposedly 100% healthy, but they are going to wean him back into full activity. They are not going to be taking chances here in late May with that hamstring. And so they're going to be gradually building him up. It's nice to see that he's already in this first OTA practice, getting a bit more activity, running routes, catching passes. He just looked faster to me. And those mini camp routes, the handful that he had, looked like he was maybe going to 75, 80%. Definitely looked more spry, was running faster, moving quicker in and out of his breaks in today's workout. And you would expect that as he gradually builds up and the chance to catch passes from Geno Smith. So that's the first big takeaway for me coming out today. And I think that's encouraging to see where he's at. You also got to see Devin Witherspoon, more on him in a little bit. He was still limited to the most part in today's practice, but did more than what he did at rookie minicamp. So both their top first-round picks, they're still working them back into action, but it's nice to see that those gradual steps are being taken so that eventually these two can be getting most of the snaps in practice and get an opportunity to really hit the ground running here at the beginning of their rookie seasons. As far as players that were not in attendance today, this is always one of the big points when you're talking about OTAs. They're voluntary, which veterans are going to show up. Jamal Adams and Jordan Brooks, we already knew from Pete Carroll that neither one of those guys was going to be in attendance. They're back in Texas rehabbing from severe knee injuries, the torn quad tendon that cost Adams all but one game last year. Brooks, the torn ACL that he had surgery to repair in January. He's ahead of schedule. Adams looks to be right on the mark. Who knows if they're going to be ready for training camp, but they're certainly not going to be on the field right now, so the Seahawks did not ask for them to come out. We'll see whether or not they are there for mandatory minicamp. Carroll hasn't talked about that yet, but they were not in attendance. There were a few players, though, surprisingly, that were not there today, and there could be a number of different reasons behind it. Tariq Woolen and Darrell Taylor, I've seen pictures. They were at the workouts last week on the field that the Seahawks had, so they have been in Seattle working out with the team, but neither one of them was on the field today. Again, first OTA of the offseason. It's not a big deal. What you got to hope is there's not an injury behind that. If there is, they're being smart, not putting them out on the field here in late May. But those two were out. Nick Bellore recently signed. Mario Edwards was not on the field either. And Michael Dixon, the punter, was not there. Again, his first OTA. You don't want to get upset or nervous about anything with these guys not being on the field. The next OTA that's open, those guys may be out there. But for this particular first session, for whatever reason, did have a chance to talk to Pete Carroll today. He was not available to the media, so no clarification on whether or not those guys are dealing with injuries or what else is going on. A lot of times these veterans that aren't there, either they just aren't there, or in the case of players like Woolen and Taylor who have been doing workouts, they may have had something off the field going on today that prevented them from being out on the field. But we should get a little more clarification on that when the next open OTA happens, especially if handful of those players still are not participating. We'll have to wait and see. As far as one other offensive storyline that is worth discussing here, we talked about this some on our show yesterday, that the offensive line, there's only so much you can evaluate this time of year. Now, Pete Carroll was talking about it at rookie minicamp. You're looking at the footwork, how quickly players get comfortable with the scheme, how they fit with the different concept. There's a lot of things that you can evaluate, but it's still a difficult time of year if you're looking at competitions at center or right guard like the Seahawks are. It's difficult to really gauge who's going to win that competition until you get the pads on in August and these guys start to move defenders off the line of scrimmage. Right now, when they're playing patty cake and non-contact practices, you're not going to be able to learn anything from that standpoint. The Seahawks feel like they know these players like Evan Brown, Anthony Bradford, Oluwatimi, Those three guys, they've seen enough film from all of them to feel comfortable with what they're going to bring from a physicality standpoint. But until you get them on the field in training camp with your team and see where they're fitting, you're not going to have a full scope of what that competition looks like. That being said, not surprisingly, the returning veteran Phil Haynes got most of the first team reps today at right guard. And at the center position, Evan Brown coming in, who has started more than 20 games the last 2 years at center and right guard. That's more experience than Oluwatimi is going to be bringing, at least in terms of NFL snaps, obviously. So those two, not a surprise that they were getting those first team reps. And I would not be surprised if throughout the offseason program that that's the way things stay. They want to get their rookies, Oluwatimi and Bradford, they want to get them acclimated to the playbook. They want to get them acclimated to the way they practice. I would expect that the competition is really going to heat up. Maybe like we saw last year with Jay Curhan and Abraham Lucas. Curhan was getting the right tackle reps during most of the offseason program and the early stages of training camp even. And then we saw Lucas gradually take that away from him at the right tackle spot. I could see that happening, especially at center with Oluwatimi, a player who's got so much experience at the college level in multiple offensive schemes at the pivot position. But for now, those guys are going to be working with the second groups. They're going to be getting their feet wet, just getting acclimated to being in the NFL. The real opportunity, obviously they want to make a positive impression right now, but the real opportunity to be able to make headway in that competition isn't probably going to be happening until we get the pads on in a couple months. Then the competition will really be on. For now, they got to do everything they can to get the playbook down, work on their fundamentals and technique with Coach Andy Dickerson and his staff, and then they can hope once they get to August that they have a real opportunity there to push these veterans. And this is really a unique situation because a lot of times when you have an incumbent veteran or a guy like Evan Brown that's come in, you're usually looking at players that are in their late 20s, early 30s. Evan Brown's 26. Phil Haynes is 27. Both these guys are still fairly young players, so if they come in and they play really well and they win the starting job, you might still have a long-term starter with one of those guys. In an ideal world, one of your rookies that's going to be under contract at a pretty affordable mid-round deal, you would prefer that player to win the job because it's going to be much cheaper. You're going to have to give a new contract to Brown or Haynes next year. But at the same time, it is a unique situation because you do have two veterans that are still pretty young players that may still have some untapped potential. I think you'd make an argument Haynes maybe has a little bit higher because he just hasn't played very many snaps and hasn't had that opportunity to really progress. So that does create an interesting scenario. Again, I think the Seahawks want the rookies to really make the most of this situation, but if Brown and or Haynes is the better player, they're not going to be upset about that going into the season. They're not just going to force a rookie onto the field simply to have a rookie out there that's on a rookie contract. Let's get now to the defensive side of the football here in OTAs and some observations. As I mentioned earlier, Jamal Adams not going to be there for OTAs. He wouldn't be able to participate right now anyway. He's still working his way back from that torn quad tendon. This is why you sign Julian Love, not so he could fill up OTA practice reps, but you brought him in because you wanted to have a legitimate starter that also can play other positions. So when Jamal Adams is healthy, you can have him on the field. You wanted that versatile Swiss Army knife that has been a proven starter in the NFL, and you want to get him the reps right now because he is adjusting to a new defense. It's a different system than he played in New York. So he and Quandre Diggs were getting the first team reps with the safeties. Jarek Reed getting some work there with the second group as well. And so the Seahawks are going to get some of these newcomers like Love and Reed plenty of reps while Jamal Adams is out. And then at the quarterback spot, as I mentioned, Tariq Woolen not being in attendance today. We don't know the reasons behind that. It could just have been something going on off the field that he was unable to be at practice. He was with the team last week. Again, you can see the pictures on the Seahawks website. He was in uniform and he was doing stuff last week in the final week of their second phase of the offseason, but he was not out there today. That meant Mike Jackson was shifted over to the right side. You may remember Jackson started every game last year for the Seahawks at left cornerback, but they had their number 5 overall pick, Devin Witherspoon, playing over there. That is where Witherspoon is going to be getting his work because the Seahawks expect he's going to be the starter over there as a rookie right away. And Tariq Woolen, the Pro Bowler, the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, is going to be on the right side, regardless of whatever happened on Monday, why he wasn't there. Those are the two they want out there, but all these reps are valuable for Mike Jackson to continue being on the field, working with that first unit. And you can expect when Tariq Woolen's back that he is not going to give up that starting job easily. He is going to be fighting tooth and nail to keep that job from Devin Witherspoon, even if pretty much all signs point to Witherspoon winning that job. He's still got to earn that position. And so that's going to be a position group that'll be worth watching. I would expect Woolen's going to be back out there. Maybe the next OTA that's open, we will see Woolen back out there. But right now, today, a good chance for Mike Jackson to get some of those mental reps working with the first team and working on the right side. Again, the more you can do, the better for a player like Jackson now is in a difficult position to maintain playing time. In the middle of the defense, no Jordan Brooks, the other player that's recovering from a knee injury. Devin Bush sporting number 0. He was number 11 for about 15 seconds before Jaxon Smith-Njigba ended up getting that number as a first-round pick, but he's now going to be wearing number 0. He and Bobby Wagner sporting his traditional number 54. They were the two inside linebackers. And just seeing the video of Bobby Wagner moving the field, that had to be an exciting moment for Seahawks fans, seeing him back with his original team. It just wasn't right seeing him in a Rams uniform last year. And speaking of sticking to tradition, Wagner told reporters after practice today that he expects he's going to have the green dot on his helmet, which means he's going to be the on-field play caller communicator. That was the role he held his first 10 years in the NFL with the Seahawks. He's accustomed to it. Jordan Brooks had that role a year ago when Wagner was in LA. This is not a surprise to me, but I will say this, for those that are expecting Bobby Wagner is going to have a somewhat diminished role or he may rotate off the field, if he's going to be wearing your green dot, that does not suggest to me that the Seahawks are expecting that he's going to have a reduced workload, because you only can have one player that's got that green dot on the helmet. And so you would think it's going to be a guy that's going to be out there all the time. I expect that Bobby Wagner, with his experience, his leadership, second team All-Pro last year, he still can play. I would expect that he's going to be playing pretty much most or all of the snaps if he's going to have that green dot on his helmet. Again, he said he expects to. We'll see what ends up happening, but I would be really surprised if anybody else is wearing that green dot on their helmet. And I think the Seahawks bringing Bobby Wagner back, they expect that he's going to be on the field as he has been for their team. Maybe he'll rotate out a few plays a game, but this just tells me if he's going to have the green dot in his helmet, you only get one guy that can do that. I expect that he is going to be on the field as much as possible for the Seahawks back on this one-year deal, entering into his 12th NFL season. One other takeaway here on defense, the Seahawks continue to stack up big bodies, and this should excite fans. Adding nose tackles in free agency. They've got a bunch of intriguing undrafted players, and Latrell Bumpus from Tennessee being the latest. And what I've really been curious about is the Seahawks, they've been signing a lot of players that don't necessarily fit the mold of the prototypical nose tackle. Bumpus is 290 pounds, and he was actually a tight end when he first went to Tennessee, and he converted to the defensive line. That is not a typical build for a nose tackle. Neither is Jonah Tavai at 5'10", 283 pounds. Robert Cooper at over 330, and their 319-pound fourth-round pick, Cameron Young. Those guys are built more like your typical NFL nose tackles, but Bumpus is an athlete, former tight end, kind of like Tavai in the sense that not a traditional build for that position, but they are listing him as a nose tackle. And he was pretty productive in 55 career games at Tennessee. And you got to remember a chunk of that is when he was a reserve tight end, but 66 tackles, double-digit tackles for loss, had 3 sacks. This is a player that put up some numbers at Tennessee. Nothing that's going to jump out as gaudy. Wasn't a guy that won any accolades as a C performer, but he's got good size. And I think the intrigue of him being a converted tight end to defensive line, that's why the Seahawks are taking their chance on him. But you add him to the mix. You've got Robert Cooper. You've got Jonah Tavai. You've got Cameron Young. You have 4 rookies, one that was drafted, 3 undrafted guys with little different size specs, a little different skill sets. I think that creates a really intriguing competition there between those rookies. And then you've added some veterans. Forrest Morrell was signed, former San Diego, or Los Angeles, still want to call him San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers defensive tackle. And so they've added some pieces there. They're getting enough big bodies that they can have a true competition at that position. And some may say, well, but you still let Al Woods go. You didn't bring in another notable, experienced veteran that can fill that role. But I would remind fans, Jarran Reed can play the nose tackle position. At this stage of his career, that might actually be a little better fit for him, depending how Seattle utilizes him in that role. But I would expect that he's going to see some snaps at that position. Cameron Young, they believe, and John Schneider said this earlier, they think that is a position where a rookie can come in and give them significant snaps right away, that the learning curve isn't going to be much. Even though he's playing in a different system, he's going to be utilized differently. We talked to Aggie about this. Open up better success for him in the NFL playing as that more traditional nose that's going to be stuffing up the middle rather than playing in a slant-heavy defense like Mississippi State had. So he's going to have a chance to hit the ground running at that nose tackle position and give them a bona fide starter on day one. They like the undrafted players that they have there. And so I think it is a positive right now. They're getting a bunch of bodies in, some different types of players, and now let the competition begin. And these are some guys you really can evaluate right now. How do they handle practices? How do they handle the drill work? How do they handle conditioning? There's a bunch of things you can look at right now. You can watch the footwork, how they handle their hand usage. There's a lot of things that you can document right now that you can assess and you can keep in your back pocket. And then once the pads come on, obviously that's really going to be the deciding factor with these guys, which ones end up making the team, who starts. But with Brian Monet being out, this is a great opportunity for all these undrafted rookies to come in. Bumpus being included in that mix, a really athletic guy. Maybe they'll end up trying him some at 3-tech as well because of his size and athleticism, but they are listing him at the nose, a lot of different body types, a lot of different skill sets. That should further the competition as the Seahawks move deeper into the offseason, eventually start training camp in late July. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. I'll be back with Rob Rang tomorrow. The two of us will continue breaking down Seattle's draft class. We'll be talking about Cameron Young and his skill set and that defensive tackle group, depth chart-wise, where things stand at the 3-tech positions as well as the nose. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, and thanks for listening to this bonus episode. Go Hawks.